The trading station orbited a dying red star, its metal bones creaking with age and neglect. Dozens of species came through its docking bays each cycle, exchanging goods, information, and the occasional threat. Nobody asked questions here. That was the whole point. Merchant Captain Vekris of the Zelthian Consortium checked his manifest for the third time, his 4 eyes scanning the holographic display with practiced efficiency. Rare minerals from the outer reach, biotech from the core worlds, and a small crate of something the seller refused to identify. Standard fare for a place like this. His communication officer, a young Zelthian named Thora, looked up from her station with concern rippling across her crystalline features. Something in her posture made Vekris pause. Thora rarely showed emotion, a trait that made her excellent at her job. "Captain, we have a situation in Cargo Bay 7, she said, her voice tight with something between fear and confusion. Vekris felt his secondary heart skip. Cargo Bay 7 was where they stored the unmarked shipments, the ones that paid triple the standard rate for no questions asked. He grabbed his plasma sidearm from its charging dock and headed down the corridor, his boots echoing against the metal floor. The cargo bay was cold, colder than it should have been. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh blue tones. 3 of his crew stood around an open shipping container, their expressions ranging from shock to outright horror. The container itself was marked with symbols Vekris didn't recognize, which was unusual for someone who had been trading across 12 sectors for 30 years. "What is it?" Vekris demanded, approaching the group. His security chief, a massive Kryn named Dorthal, stepped aside. Inside the container, barely visible in the dim light, was a creature Vekris had only seen in intelligence briefings and warnings. A human. The human was unconscious, its chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Its body was covered in injuries, deep wounds that would have killed most species twice over. Burn marks crossed its arms and legs. One of its eyes was swollen shut. Someone had beaten this creature within an inch of its life, and then stuffed it into a shipping container like discarded cargo. "Is it alive?" Vekris asked, though the question felt stupid the moment it left his mouth. "Barely," Dorthal replied. "I checked the container's manifest. It was marked as industrial equipment, bound for the Kryn mining colonies in the 7th sector." Vekris felt ice in his veins. The Kryn mining colonies were death camps in all but name, places where slaves were worked until their bodies gave out. If this human was being shipped there, it meant someone had sold it into the worst kind of bondage the galaxy had to offer. "Who sold us this shipment?" Vekris asked. Thora's voice came through his communicator. "Checking now, Captain." The seller was a Draxan merchant vessel, the Crushing Talon. They departed 30 minutes before we opened the cargo. Vekris cursed in 3 languages. The Draxans were slavers, everyone knew that. But they usually dealt in species that the Galactic Council didn't care about. Humans, though, humans were different. Humans were from a backwater planet that nobody paid attention to, sure. But they were also classified as a protected developing species under Council law. Trading them was illegal in every sector of civilized space. "Get medical down here now," Vekris ordered, "and seal the cargo bay. Nobody talks about this." Dorthal shifted his weight, his armor plates clicking together. "Captain, with respect, we should dump it at the nearest station. Humans are trouble. Everyone knows the stories." Vekris did know the stories. He knew that humans were supposedly savage, unpredictable, and vengeful beyond reason. He knew that their homeworld had been quarantined by the Council after they had wiped out 3 pirate fleets that made the mistake of raiding their outer colonies. He knew that the standing order for most merchant vessels was to avoid human space entirely. But he also knew what happened to creatures sent to the Kryn mining colonies. He had seen the reports, watched the footage that whistleblowers smuggled out. "No living being deserved that fate. We help it," Vekris said quietly. "Get medical here now." The ship's doctor, a Velian named Cirrus, arrived within minutes. She took one look at the human and her tentacles curled tight against her body, a sign of extreme distress. "Captain, I have never treated a human before. I don't even know if our medicines will work on its biology." "Do what you can," Vekris said. They moved the human to the medical bay, careful not to jostle its broken body. Cirrus worked through the night, her tentacles moving with practiced precision as she sealed wounds, set bones, and pumped the creature full of broad-spectrum antibiotics. The human never woke, its breathing steady but weak. 3 days passed. The trading station fell behind them as the ship jumped through hyperspace toward their next destination. Vekris spent those days in his quarters, researching everything he could find about humans. What he discovered didn't comfort him. Humans came from a death world called Earth, a planet so hostile that its dominant species had evolved to survive almost anything. They healed from injuries that would cripple other species. They could go days without food or water. Their pain tolerance was legendary, as was their capacity for violence when threatened. But more than that, humans were protective of their own. Intensely, obsessively protective. When pirates had taken a human colony ship 2 decades ago, Earth had responded by sending warships that tracked the pirates across 4 sectors and destroyed them to the last vessel. No demands, no negotiations, just systematic extermination. Vekris stared at the medical bay monitor, watching the humans' vital signs strengthen hour by hour. What had he done? He had saved a member of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. And somewhere out there, the Drax enslavers who had beaten and sold this creature were still operating, still trading, still hurting people. On the 4th day, the human opened its eyes. Cirrus called Vekris immediately. He arrived to find the human sitting up in the medical bed. Its working eye focused and alert despite the trauma its body had endured. The creature was smaller than Vekris had expected, barely reaching his shoulder in height, but there was something in the way it held itself that made him instinctively take a step back. "Where am I?" the human asked, its voice rough and damaged but understandable through the ship's translation system. "You're safe," Vekris said, keeping his hands visible and unthreatening. "You're aboard the merchant vessel Silver Dawn. We found you in a cargo container. You were being shipped to the Kryn mining colonies." The human's eye went cold, a transformation so complete that Vekris felt his danger instincts screaming. "Who sold me?" "Drax enslavers," Vekris said. "They're long gone now. We couldn't track them." The human was silent for a long moment, its jaw working as if chewing on thoughts too bitter to swallow. Then it looked directly at Vekris with an intensity that made the captain's skin crawl. "You saved my life," the human said. "That means I owe you a debt. Among my people, such debts are sacred." "You owe me nothing," Vekris said quickly. "We did what anyone would do." The human's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile but looked more like a wound. "No, most wouldn't have. Most would have dumped me out an airlock or delivered me as ordered. You chose differently. I won't forget that." Something in the human's tone made Vekris deeply, fundamentally uneasy. He had just done a good deed, saved a life, made the moral choice. So why did he feel like he had just made the biggest mistake of his entire existence? The human's name was Marcus Chen, a colony engineer who had been traveling between Earth's outer settlements when the Draxan raiders hit his transport ship. He told this story in a flat, emotionless voice that somehow made the horror of it worse. 23 passengers on that ship, 12 dead in the initial attack. The survivors sold to the highest bidders across 3 sectors. Vekris listened from the doorway of the medical bay, his claws gripping the frame hard enough to leave marks. Cirrus continued her work, scanning Marcus with medical equipment that hummed and chirped with each pass. The human's injuries were healing at a rate that defied biological logic. Bones that should have taken months to mend were already knitting together. Tissue that should have scarred was regenerating clean. "Your people heal quickly," Cirrus observed, her tentacles writing notes on a datapad. "We're stubborn that way," Marcus replied. His working eye tracked Vekris with the focus of a predator marking prey. "How long until we reach the next station?" 3 days, Vekris said. "We're headed for Haven Station in the neutral zone. You can contact your people from there, arrange transportation home." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I'm not going home." "Not yet," Vekris felt his stomach drop. "The Draxans are gone. We have no way to track them." "You don't," Marcus agreed. "But I do." The human tapped the side of his head near his temple. Vekris saw it then, a small implant barely visible beneath the skin. Standard colony equipment, he realized, used for communication and data storage. But Marcus was smiling that terrible smile again. And Vekris understood with growing dread that this implant held something more. When they captured us, they were sloppy, overconfident. I was conscious for parts of it, coherent enough to record data through my neural interface. Ship signatures, voice patterns, navigational coordinates. I have everything I need to find them. "That's suicide," Dorthal rumbled from behind Vekris. The security chief had been listening from the corridor. "You're one being against an entire slaver operation. You wouldn't last an hour." Marcus looked at the massive Kryn warrior with something like pity. "You don't understand humans very well, do you?" "I know enough," Dorthal shot back. I know you're dangerous, that your species has a reputation for violence. But reputation doesn't stop plasma bolts. You go after those slavers alone, you'll die. Maybe, Marcus said, but they'll die first. That's what matters. Vecris stepped into the medical bay, his hands raised in a placating gesture. Marcus, please. Be reasonable. Contact your government, let Earth handle this. They have the resources, the military power. They can bring these slavers to justice properly. The human's laugh was bitter and cold. Justice? You mean trials and bureaucracy and diplomatic negotiations? No, those bastards killed my friends, beat me half to death, and sold me like cargo. They hurt other humans too, humans who are still out there suffering. I'm not waiting for committees and councils to maybe, possibly someday do something about it. Then what will you do? Vecris asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Marcus swung his legs off the medical bed, wincing as damaged muscles protested. He stood, shakier than he probably wanted to appear, but standing nonetheless. I'm going to kill every single one of them. But first I need to get to Haven Station and send a message home. The next 3 days were tense. Marcus healed with frightening speed, moving from barely able to stand to walking the ship's corridors with only a slight limp. He was polite to the crew, thanked them for their help, and spent most of his time in the cargo bay doing exercises that left him drenched in sweat, but visibly stronger. Thora reported that Marcus had asked for access to the ship's communication array, claiming he needed to send an encrypted message to Earth. Vecris authorized it, though every instinct screamed that he was making another mistake. The human spent 2 hours crafting his message, his expression grim and focused. What did you tell them? Vecris asked afterward, finding Marcus in the observation deck staring at the stars. The truth, Marcus said simply. I told them what happened. I told them about the other passengers, the ones who were sold to different buyers. I told them about the Draxons and their operation. I gave them everything I recorded, and, Vecris prompted. Marcus turned to look at him, and in the starlight his face looked ancient and terrible. And I told them not to wait for me. I told them to burn the slavers from the galaxy like the disease they are. No mercy, no quarter, no survivors. Vecris felt cold despite the ship's environmental controls. You asked your government to go to war. I asked my government to defend its citizens, Marcus corrected. There's a difference. When someone hurts a human, when someone takes a human as a slave, when someone thinks they can treat us like animals because we're from a backwater planet nobody cares about, they need to learn something important. They need to learn that there are consequences. Terrible, absolute, inevitable consequences. Haven Station appeared on their sensors the next morning. A massive structure built into an asteroid. Neutral territory where dozens of species traded under the watchful eye of Galactic Council peacekeepers. It should have been safe. It should have been just another stop on Vecris's trade route. But as the Silver Dawn approached the docking berths, Thora's voice cut through the bridge with sharp urgency. Captain, I'm picking up multiple unknown vessels on approach vectors. Military grade, heavy armor, weapons hot. Vecris pulled up the tactical display, his 4 eyes widening at what he saw. 8 ships, sleek and dangerous, painted in colors he didn't recognize. They moved with precision that spoke of military training, surrounding Haven Station in a blockade formation. Hail them, Vecris ordered. Static filled the communication channel for a moment, then a voice responded. Human voice, filtered through translation software but carrying an edge of cold authority. This is Captain Rivera of the United Earth Navy, commanding the strike group Righteous Fury. Haven Station is under quarantine. All vessels are to maintain current positions and prepare for inspection. Inspection for what? Vecris demanded. We're looking for Draxon slavers, Rivera replied. We received intelligence that they operate through this station. Anyone found to be cooperating with them will be considered enemy combatants. Anyone found to be harboring their victims will be protected under Earth jurisdiction. These are not negotiable terms. Marcus appeared on the bridge, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what was happening. He looked at the tactical display at the Earth warships surrounding the station and smiled. You called them, Vecris said, his voice hollow. I told you, Marcus replied. I told them to burn the slavers from the galaxy. Did you think I was speaking metaphorically? On the tactical display, the Earth warships began launching boarding parties toward Haven Station. The station's peacekeepers tried to protest, their transmissions full of outrage and demands and citations of galactic law. The humans ignored all of it. They're going to start a war, Dorthal said, watching the display with something like awe. They're going to start a war over one human. Marcus turned to look at the Kryn warrior, and his expression was harder than diamond. No. They're going to start a war because someone thought they could hurt humans without consequences. There's a difference. And before this is over, every slaver, every pirate, every petty tyrant in this galaxy is going to learn that humans protect their own. Always. No matter the cost. Vekris stood frozen on his bridge, watching human warships surround a neutral station, watching the beginning of something that could tear the galaxy apart. And he realized with perfect, terrible clarity that the stories about humans, all those warnings and rumors and legends, hadn't been exaggerations at all. They had been understatements. Haven Station's administrator was a Veltorian named Kess, a bureaucrat with 40 years of experience managing the delicate politics of neutral space. Vekris watched through the station's public feeds as Kess tried to negotiate with the human captain, his translator device working overtime to convey his increasingly desperate appeals. This is a violation of the neutral zone accords, Kess said, his thorax plates vibrating with agitation. You cannot simply board a council-protected station without authorization. There are procedures, protocols, legal channels. Captain Rivera's face on the view screen was carved from stone. She was older than Marcus, her hair shot through with gray, but her eyes held the same terrifying certainty. Administrator Kess, I'm going to explain something to you very clearly. 6 days ago, Draxan slavers attacked an Earth transport vessel. They killed 12 of our citizens and sold 11 others into slavery. One of those 11 ended up on a ship currently docked at your station. That means your station was part of the supply chain. That makes you complicit. I had no knowledge of any slaving operation, Kess protested. Your ignorance is not our problem, Rivera said coldly. You will allow our boarding teams to search every ship, every cargo hold, every storage locker on this station. You will provide us with complete manifests and docking records for the past 3 months. You will cooperate fully, or we will treat your station as a hostile target. Those are your only options. Kess's translator crackled with what might have been profanity in his native language. You're threatening to attack a civilian station over one human? 11 humans, Rivera corrected. And yes, Administrator, that's exactly what we're doing. You have 10 minutes to comply. The connection cut. Vekris looked at Marcus, who stood on the Silver Dawn's bridge with his arms crossed, watching the feeds with calm satisfaction. The other crew members gave the human a wide berth, their body language screaming discomfort and fear. They're really going to do it, Thora whispered. They're going to board the station by force. They won't need to, Marcus said. Kess will fold. He's a survivor, not a martyr. He'll give them everything they want. The human was right. 8 minutes later, Haven Station's docking clamps released to allow Earth boarding parties access. Dozens of human soldiers in powered armor swept through the corridors, their weapons drawn, their movements precise and professional. They weren't raiders or pirates acting on emotion. This was a military operation, planned and executed with clinical efficiency. Vekris received a communication request from the station authority. He accepted it, and Kess's face appeared on his screen, looking 10 years older than he had an hour ago. Captain Vekris, the humans are demanding to speak with you. They know you have one of their people aboard your vessel. I strongly suggest you cooperate. I saved his life, Vekris said, hating how defensive he sounded. We rescued him from slavers. Then you should have nothing to worry about, Kess said, though his tone suggested he believed otherwise. I'm sending you docking coordinates. The humans want to meet with you and your passenger immediately. The meeting took place in a conference room that the humans had commandeered near the station's central hub. Captain Rivera sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 soldiers who looked like they could tear through bulkheads with their bare hands. Their armor hummed with power, weapons systems ready but not quite aimed. Marcus entered first, and Vekris watched as something passed between the human civilian and the military officer. Rivera stood, walked around the table, and embraced Marcus like he was family. No words passed between them, but when they separated, both had tears in their eyes. Mr. Chen, Rivera said formally, though her voice was thick with emotion. It's good to see you alive. Good to be alive, Captain, Marcus replied. Thanks to Captain Vekris and his crew. Rivera turned her attention to Vekris, and he felt the weight of that gaze like physical pressure. She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. before extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Captain Vekris, on behalf of Earth and the United Earth Navy, I thank you for saving this man's life. Marcus sent us detailed reports of your actions. You found him being shipped to a death camp and chose to help him despite the risks. That took courage." Vekris carefully took her hand, matching the strange gripping gesture humans used. Her hand was smaller than his, but much stronger, her grip like a vice. "I did what anyone should do, but most wouldn't," Rivera said. "We've been tracking the Draxan slaver network for 3 years. Do you know how many ships passed on helping humans in that time? How many captains saw our people in distress and chose to look away because we're from a species most of the galaxy considers beneath notice?" "I didn't know," Vekris said quietly. 83 ships, Rivera continued, her voice hardening. 83 different vessels that had opportunities to help captured humans and chose not to. Some didn't want the trouble. Some were afraid of our reputation. Some just didn't care. You're the first captain who chose differently. She released his hand and gestured to the seats around the table. Vekris sat, his crew filing in behind him. Dorthal took position near the door, his massive frame tense and ready despite the obvious futility of fighting in a room full of human soldiers. "I need to know everything," Rivera said, pulling up a holographic display. "Every detail about how you found Marcus, who sold him to you, what routes they were using. This is now a matter of Earth security." Vekris told her everything, from the moment they discovered Marcus in the cargo container to the Draxan merchant vessel that had already departed when they opened the cargo. Rivera listened without interruption, her eyes tracking every detail on the holographic display as her crew cross-referenced shipping records and navigational data. "The crushing Talon," Rivera said when Vekris finished. "Draxan privateer operating out of the Kryn sectors. We have intel on them. They've been moving humans for at least 6 months, maybe longer." "What will you do?" Vekris asked, though he feared the answer. Rivera's smile was cold enough to freeze stars. "We're going to find every ship, every station, every person involved in this slaving network. We're going to tear them apart piece by piece, and we're going to make sure that everyone in this galaxy understands what happens when you hurt humans." "That's a declaration of war," Dorthal said from the doorway. "You're talking about attacking sovereign vessels, violating territorial boundaries. The Galactic Council will never allow it." "The Galactic Council," Rivera said, turning to face the Kryn warrior, "has proven remarkably ineffective at protecting developing species from exploitation. The laws exist, sure, but enforcement is laughable. Pirates raid with impunity as long as they pay the right bribes. Slavers operate openly in sectors where Council peacekeepers mysteriously never patrol. We asked for help 3 years ago when this started. We filed reports, submitted evidence, went through every legal channel. Do you know what the Council did?" Silence filled the room. "Nothing," Rivera continued. "They did absolutely nothing. They told us that humans needed to be patient, that these things take time, that we should trust the process. So we trusted the process, and in those 3 years, over 400 humans were taken as slaves. 400 of our people suffering while the Council held meetings and formed committees and drafted reports that nobody would ever read." She stood, pacing to the viewport that looked out over Haven Station's docking bays. "We're done asking for permission. We're done trusting that someone else will protect our citizens. From this moment forward, any vessel, any organization, any government that harms a human or profits from harming humans becomes an enemy of Earth. No exceptions, no negotiations, no mercy. You'll start a war that could consume the entire galaxy," Vekris said. "Then the galaxy should have protected our people when we asked nicely," Rivera replied. "Earth tried diplomacy. We tried working within the system. We tried being good little developing species who stayed in their corner and followed all the rules. And where did that get us? It got us 400 slaves and a council that couldn't be bothered to care." Marcus spoke up from his seat, his voice quiet but carrying clearly. "Captain, what about the others? The other passengers from the transport?" Rivera's expression softened slightly. "We've located 7 of them. 3 are alive and being extracted as we speak. The other 4 died in captivity. As for the one who was supposed to be delivered to the Kryn mining colonies with you, we're still searching." Marcus closed his eye, his jaw clenching. "They need to pay for that." "All of them. They will," Rivera promised. "Every single one." The meeting continued for another hour as Rivera's intelligence officers questioned Vekris and his crew about every detail they could remember. Ship configurations, accent markers in the Draxan seller's speech, even the smell of the cargo bay where they found Marcus. The humans were building a picture piece by piece of an entire criminal network. When they were finally dismissed, Vecris felt exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. He had saved one life and somehow triggered a cascade that would reshape galactic politics. As he walked back to the Silver Dawn with his crew, he couldn't shake the feeling that history was being written around him in blood and fire. "Captain," Thora said softly as they approached their ship, "what have we—" The Galactic Council convened an emergency session 6 hours after the humans seized Haven Station. Vecris watched the proceedings from the Silver Dawn's observation deck, the public broadcast crackling through the ship's communication system. Marcus stood beside him, arms crossed, expression unreadable. The council chamber was a monument to bureaucratic grandeur, circular and vast, with representatives from 93 species arranged in concentric rings, according to their civilization's age and influence. At the center sat the High Arbiter, an ancient Valdorian whose species had been navigating the stars when humans were still figuring out agriculture. "This body recognizes Ambassador Peters of Earth," the High Arbiter announced, his voice carrying the weight of 10,000 years of diplomatic tradition. A human woman stood, younger than Rivera but carrying herself with the same dangerous confidence. She wore formal diplomatic attire, but Vecris noticed the military posture, the way her eyes tracked every being in the chamber like a soldier identifying threats. "Thank you, High Arbiter," Peters said. "I'm here to formally notify the Council that Earth is invoking Article 72 of the Protected Species Accord." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Vecris didn't understand the significance, but Marcus's expression hardened into something approaching satisfaction. "Article 72 has never been invoked," the High Arbiter said slowly. "It was designed for extreme circumstances, Ambassador. Please explain your reasoning." Peters pulled up a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. Images appeared, stark and brutal. Humans in chains, humans in cages, humans beaten, starved, worked to death in mining colonies and factory ships. The chamber fell silent as the images cycled through, each one a testament to suffering that had gone unanswered. "For 3 years," Peters said, her voice cutting through the silence, "Earth has been filing reports about systematic slavery targeting our species. We have documented over 400 cases, provided evidence, submitted formal complaints through every channel this council maintains. We asked for help. We asked for protection under the laws that are supposed to shield developing species from exploitation. We were told to be patient." She paused, letting the images continue their terrible rotation. "These are the results of patience. These are the consequences of trusting the system. Article 72 states that any protected species facing systematic predation may take independent action to defend its citizens if the Council fails to provide adequate protection. We are invoking that article as of this moment." The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted over each other in dozens of languages, the translation system struggling to keep up. The Draxan representative, a scarred warrior with more metal than flesh, rose from his seat with fury radiating from every movement. "This is an act of war," the Draxan ambassador bellowed. "Earth has no right to seize neutral stations, to threaten sovereign vessels, to make demands of civilizations that have existed for millennia. Then maybe those ancient civilizations should have stopped younger species from being enslaved." Peters shot back. "We didn't start this. Your people, your ships, your merchants are the ones who decided humans were easy targets. You thought we were too far away, too weak, too unimportant to fight back. You were wrong." The Kryn representative stood, his massive form drawing every eye. "The Kryn Consortium has operated mining colonies for centuries. We purchase labor through legal channels. If some of that labor came from questionable sources, that is not our responsibility." Marcus made a sound that might have been a laugh or a growl. Vecris glanced at him and saw murder in the human's single working eye. "Legal channels," Peters repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. "Is that what you call buying sapient beings and working them to death? You knew those slaves were humans. You knew taking them violated council law, but you did it anyway because you thought there would be no consequences. What do you want?" the High Arbiter asked. And for the first time, Vecris heard something like fear in the ancient being's voice. Peters smiled, and it was the most frightening thing Vecris had ever seen. "We want every human currently held in slavery released immediately. We want complete access to all records related to human trafficking for the past 5 years. We want the surrender of every captain, every merchant, every administrator who participated in or profited from human slavery. And we want a council resolution formally recognizing Earth's right to enforce protection of its citizens by any means necessary. That's impossible, the Draxan representative snarled. You're demanding we hand over hundreds of our people for punishment. You're demanding sovereignty over council space. The council will never agree to these terms. Then we'll take what we need by force, Peters said simply. Your call. The High Arbiter raised a hand calling for silence. The chamber reluctantly quieted, though tension crackled like electricity through the artificial atmosphere. Ambassador Peters, what you're asking for would fundamentally reshape galactic law. It would set precedents that could destabilize centuries of carefully balanced power structures. Good, Peters said. Those power structures allowed slavery to flourish. Time for something new. The session continued for hours, but Vecris already knew how it would end. He could see it in the body language of the council members and the way they looked at the human ambassador, with a mixture of fear and calculation. Earth wasn't bluffing. The warships surrounding Haven Station proved that. The systematic seizure of slaver vessels proved that. The humans were done talking, and the council knew it. Marcus finally turned away from the broadcast, his shoulders tight with anger. They're going to cave, he said. Not because they care about doing the right thing, but because they're afraid. They're realizing that humans aren't just another species to push around. Is that enough for you? Vecris asked. Fear instead of justice? Marcus looked at him with an expression Vecris couldn't quite read. Justice is a luxury that requires civilization. What we're doing right now isn't about justice. It's about survival. We're teaching the galaxy that humans are predators too, that there's a cost to hurting us. Once that lesson sinks in, maybe then we can talk about justice. A priority message came through on Vecris's personal communicator. He pulled it up and felt his blood freeze. It was from his company, the Zelthian Consortium. The message was brief and brutal. All Zelthian vessels were to avoid Earth space, avoid human ships, and most critically, avoid any involvement in what the company was now calling the human question. They're scared, Thora said, reading over his shoulder. Everyone's scared, as they should be, Marcus replied. He pulled up his own communicator, checking messages that had accumulated during the council session. His expression darkened as he read. They found another transport. Draxan raiders hit an Earth supply convoy near the outer reach. 6 humans taken this time. When? Vecris asked. 2 hours ago, Marcus said. While the council was debating whether Earth had the right to protect its people, slavers were taking more humans. That's exactly why we can't wait for permission anymore. An alert sounded through the Silver Dawn's communication system. Captain Rivera's voice came through, clipped and urgent. All vessels docked at Haven Station. Be advised that we have located the Draxan ship-crushing Talon in the Keswick system, 3 jumps from our current position. We are deploying pursuit vessels immediately. The station lockdown will continue until our operation is complete. Vecris felt his stomach drop. The Keswick system was deep in Draxan territory, past 2 checkpoints and a military outpost. If the humans went there, they would be starting a shooting war with one of the galaxy's major powers. They're really going to do it, Dorthal said, appearing in the observation deck doorway. They're going to attack a Draxan military system. Not attack, Marcus corrected. Extract. There's a difference. We're not trying to conquer anyone. We're just getting our people back. By force, Dorthal pointed out. In sovereign Draxan space. With military vessels, that's an act of war no matter how you phrase it. Marcus turned to face the Kryn warrior and something passed between them. A mutual respect born of understanding. Both came from warrior cultures, both understood the language of strength and consequences. Let me tell you something about humans, Marcus said quietly. We spent 10,000 years killing each other over resources, territory, ideology, and stupidity. We got very good at war, very efficient at violence. We learned how to fight in every environment our death world could throw at us. We learned how to survive when survival should have been impossible. And then we finally grew up enough to stop fighting each other and start working together. He paused, looking out at the stars. Do you know what happens when a species that evolved to be the apex predator on a death world stops fighting itself and focuses that aggression outward? Do you know what happens when 10 billion humans, all those descendants of survivors and fighters and stubborn idiots who refused to die, decide that something is important enough to fight for? War, Dorthal said. Total war, Marcus agreed. War like this galaxy hasn't seen since the ancient conflicts that created the Council in the first place. Earth has been peaceful because we chose to be peaceful. We followed the rules because we believed in the system. The system. Article 72 states that any protected species facing systematic predation may take independent action to defend its citizens if the Council fails to provide adequate protection. We are invoking that article as of this moment. The chamber erupted. Representatives shouted over each other in dozens of languages, the translation system struggling to keep up. The Draxan representative, a scarred warrior with more metal than flesh, rose from his seat with fury radiating from every movement. "This is an act of war," the Draxan ambassador bellowed. "Earth has no right to seize neutral stations, to threaten sovereign vessels, to make demands of civilizations that have existed for millennia. Then maybe those ancient civilizations should have stopped younger species from being enslaved," Peters shot back. "We didn't start this. Your people, your ships, your merchants are the ones who decided humans were easy targets. You thought we were too far away, too weak, too unimportant to fight back. You were wrong." The Kryn representative stood, his massive form drawing every eye. "The Kryn Consortium has operated mining colonies for centuries. We purchase labor through legal channels. If some of that labor came from questionable sources, that is not our responsibility." Marcus made a sound that might have been a laugh or a growl. Vecris glanced at him and saw murder in the human's single working eye. "Legal channels," Peters repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. "Is that what you call buying sapient beings and working them to death? You knew those slaves were humans. You knew taking them violated council law, but you did it anyway because you thought there would be no consequences. What do you want?" the High Arbiter asked, and for the first time Vecris heard something like fear in the ancient being's voice. Peters smiled, and it was the most frightening thing Vecris had ever seen. "We want every human currently held in slavery released immediately. We want complete access to all records related to human trafficking for the past 5 years. We want the surrender of every captain, every merchant, every administrator who participated in or profited from human slavery. And we want a council resolution formally recognizing Earth's right to enforce protection of its citizens by any means necessary." "That's impossible," the Draxan representative snarled. "You're demanding we hand over hundreds of our people for punishment. You're demanding sovereignty over council space. The council will never agree to these terms." "Then we'll take what we need by force," Peter said simply. "Your call." The High Arbiter raised a hand, calling for silence. The chamber reluctantly quieted, though tension crackled like electricity through the artificial atmosphere. "Ambassador Peters, what you're asking for would fundamentally reshape galactic law. It would set precedents that could destabilize centuries of carefully balanced power structures." "Good," Peters said. "Those power structures allowed slavery to flourish. Time for something new." The session continued for hours, but Vecris already knew how it would end. He could see it in the body language of the council members, in the way they looked at the human ambassador with a mixture of fear and calculation. Earth wasn't bluffing. The warships surrounding Haven Station proved that. The systematic seizure of slaver vessels proved that. The humans were done talking, and the council knew it. Marcus finally turned away from the broadcast, his shoulders tight with anger. "They're going to cave," he said, "not because they care about doing the right thing, but because they're afraid. They're realizing that humans aren't just another species to push around." "Is that enough for you?" Vecris asked. "Fear instead of justice?" Marcus looked at him with an expression Vecris couldn't quite read. "Justice is a luxury that requires civilization. What we're doing right now isn't about justice. It's about survival. We're teaching the galaxy that humans are predators too, that there's a cost to hurting us. Once that lesson sinks in, maybe then we can talk about justice." A priority message came through on Vecris's personal communicator. He pulled it up and felt his blood freeze. It was from his company, the Zelthian Consortium. The message was brief and brutal. All Zelthian vessels were to avoid Earth space, avoid human ships, and most critically, avoid any involvement in what the company was now calling the human question. "They're scared," Thora said, reading over his shoulder. "Everyone's scared." "As they should be," Marcus replied. He pulled up his own communicator, checking messages that had accumulated during the council session. His expression darkened as he read. They found another transport. Draxan raiders hit an Earth supply convoy near the outer reach. 6 humans taken this time. "When?" Vecris asked. 2 hours ago, Marcus said. While the council was debating whether Earth had the right to protect its people, slavers were taking more humans. That's exactly why we can't wait for permission anymore. An alert sounded through the Silver Dawn's communication system. Captain Rivera's voice came through, clipped and urgent. All vessels docked at Haven Station. Be advised that we have located the Draxon ship crushing Talon in the Keswick system. 3 jumps from our current position. We are deploying pursuit vessels immediately. The station lockdown will continue until our operation is complete. Vekris felt his stomach drop. The Keswick system was deep in Draxon territory, past 2 checkpoints and a military outpost. If the humans went there, they would be starting a shooting war with one of the galaxy's major powers. They're really going to do it, Dorthal said, appearing in the observation deck doorway. They're going to attack a Draxon military system. Not attack, Marcus corrected. Extract, there's a difference. We're not trying to conquer anyone. We're just getting our people back. By force, Dorthal pointed out. In sovereign Draxon space, with military vessels. That's an act of war no matter how you phrase it. Marcus turned to face the Kryn warrior and something passed between them. A mutual respect, born of understanding. Both came from warrior cultures. Both understood the language of strength and consequences. Let me tell you something about humans, Marcus said quietly. We spent 10,000 years killing each other over resources, territory, ideology, and stupidity. We got very good at war, very efficient at violence. We learned how to fight in every environment our death world could throw at us. We learned how to survive when survival should have been impossible. And then we finally grew up enough to stop fighting each other and start working together. He paused, looking out at the stars. Do you know what happens when a species that evolved to be the apex predator on a death world stops fighting itself and focuses that aggression outward? Do you know what happens when 10 billion humans, all those descendants of survivors and fighters and stubborn idiots who refuse to die, decide that something is important enough to fight for? War, Dorthal said. Total war, Marcus agreed. War like this galaxy hasn't seen since the ancient conflicts that created the Council in the first place. Earth has been peaceful because we chose to be peaceful. We followed the rules because we believed in the system. But now the system has failed us, and we're remembering what we were before we civilized ourselves. Vekris watched as Earth warships began breaking formation around Haven Station, several vessels turning toward the hyperspace coordinates that would take them to the Keswick system. He thought about Marcus's words, about a species that had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing and was now unleashing that expertise on an unprepared galaxy. What have I done? Vekris whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Marcus heard him anyway. The human put a hand on Vekris's shoulder, the gesture oddly gentle given everything else. You saved my life. You made the moral choice when you could have looked away. You're a good being, Captain Vekris. None of this is your fault. But it started with me, Vekris said. If I had just delivered you as ordered, if I had stayed out of it, maybe none of this would be happening. No, Marcus said firmly. This was always going to happen. The slavers were always going to push too far. Earth was always going to respond. You just happened to be at the pivot point. But what you did matters. You showed that not everyone in this galaxy is content to let evil flourish. That's worth remembering, even if everything else goes to hell. On the view screen, the last of the Earth warships jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a skeleton crew to maintain control of Haven Station. The Council broadcast continued in the background. Representatives still arguing about jurisdiction and precedent and law, not realizing that the age of law had ended the moment a Zelthian merchant captain chose compassion over convenience. What happens now? Thora asked. Nobody answered because nobody knew. They were all standing at the edge of an abyss watching the galaxy tilt toward something new and terrible and necessary. Somewhere in the Keswick system, human warships were about to make first contact with Draxon military vessels, and the first shots of a war that nobody wanted but everyone had created were about to be fired. Vekris returned to his quarters and stared at his reflection in the polished metal of the wall. He looked the same as always. 4 eyes, crystalline features, the body of a being who had spent 40 years navigating the safe and profitable routes of galactic commerce. But something had changed inside him, something fundamental. He had saved a human's life, and in doing so he had helped start a war. The battle for the Keswick system lasted 17 minutes. Vekris watched the after-action reports from Haven Station. His crew gathered around the holographic display in stunned silence. The Earth Strike Force had jumped into Draxon space with 8 warships against a military outpost that housed 43 vessels and 3 orbital defense platforms. By every conventional calculation, the humans should have been obliterated. Instead, they had won decisively. "How is this possible?" Thora whispered, watching footage of Earth vessels tearing through Draxon battle formations with terrifying precision. The human ships moved unlike anything Vekris had ever seen, their movements organic and unpredictable, as if they were alive rather than machines. "They're not playing by the same rules," Dorthal observed. The Kryn warrior had seen more combat than anyone else on the crew, but even he looked shaken. Standard tactics rely on maintaining formation, protecting key vessels, establishing firing lanes. The humans ignore all of that. They're fighting like a pack of predators, each ship independent but coordinated, exploiting weaknesses faster than the Draxons can adapt. The tactical data told the story in cold numbers. Earth vessels had taken damage certainly, but nothing critical. Meanwhile, 12 Draxon ships were destroyed outright. 17 more disabled and the rest scattered in retreat. The orbital platforms were now debris. And in the chaos, human boarding teams had extracted the crushing Talon from a military dry dock and captured its entire crew. Marcus stood apart from the group, his face illuminated by his personal communicator, as he read private messages from Earth Command. His expression cycled through relief, rage, and something darker that Vekris couldn't identify. "They got them," Marcus said finally, his voice rough. "The crew of the crushing Talon. Every single one of the bastards who took us, who killed my friends. They're in custody now." "And the other humans?" Vekris asked. "The ones who were supposed to be delivered to the mining colonies?" Marcus's jaw tightened. 2 were still alive. The boarding team found them in the ship's hold, barely conscious but alive. The other 3 died in transit. The Draxons dumped their bodies in space like garbage. Silence filled the observation deck. Even knowing what slavers were capable of, the casual cruelty of it hit like a physical blow. 3 people murdered and discarded, their only crime being born on a planet the galaxy considered insignificant. "What will happen to the slavers?" Thora asked. "Trial," Marcus said. "Earth trial under Earth law, which means they'll face a jury of humans who just watched footage of what they did to our people. I don't think you need to guess the verdict." Another alert came through the station's communication system. This time it was Ambassador Peters, her face projected on every public screen in Haven Station. She looked tired but grimly satisfied. "To all vessels and personnel currently at Haven Station, this is Ambassador Peters with an update on Earth's operations. As of 2 hours ago, Earth Naval Forces successfully engaged and defeated Draxon military elements in the Keswick system. We have recovered 2 human captives and captured the entire crew of the slaver vessel, Crushing Talon. Additionally, we have seized complete records of the Draxon slaving network, including buyer lists, transport routes, and financial transactions." She paused, letting that information sink in. Vekris felt his stomach clench. Complete records meant Earth now had names. Every being who had purchased human slaves, every captain who had transported them, every administrator who had processed the transactions. "These records," Peters continued, "contain over 650 distinct entities across 41 species and 19 sovereign territories. Earth is hereby issuing warrants for all individuals identified in these documents. We are demanding their immediate surrender to Earth authorities for trial. Any government or organization that refuses to comply will be considered hostile to Earth and treated accordingly." The feed cut to a list, names scrolling across the screen in every major galactic language. Vekris watched in growing horror as the list went on, captains and merchants and officials from across the galaxy, all exposed in one brutal revelation. The Draxons had kept meticulous records, and now those records were weapons in Earth's hands. "They're making an example," Dorthal said, "not just of the slavers themselves, but of everyone who enabled them. They're going after the whole system." "It's more than that," Marcus said. He pulled up his own copy of the records, scrolling through with grim focus. "Look at the buyer list. Kryn mining corporations, Veltorian factory ships, even some Zelthian merchant houses. This wasn't just a few rogue criminals. This was an industry. Thousands of beings profiting from human suffering, and they all thought they were safe because humans were just backwater nobodies who nobody cared about." Vekris saw his own company name flash by in the records, not the Silver Dawn, thankfully. But another Zelthian vessel had purchased 3 humans 6 months ago. His species had participated in this horror, maybe unknowingly, maybe willfully ignorant, but participated nonetheless. What will Earth do with all these names? Vekris asked, though he feared the answer. Hunt them, Marcus said simply. Every single one. It doesn't matter how powerful they are, how connected, how far they run. Earth has decided that slavery of humans ends now, and anyone involved pays the price. No exceptions. The council convened again 3 hours later, but this time the tone was different. The representatives who had been defiant before now spoke in measured tones, their body language defensive rather than aggressive. The Draxan representative didn't even attend, his seat conspicuously empty. The High Arbiter looked older than Vekris had ever seen him. The council has reviewed Earth's demands and the evidence presented. After much deliberation, we have reached a decision. Ambassador Peters stood in the center of the chamber, flanked by 2 human soldiers who looked ready to fight their way out if necessary. But Vekris could see it in her eyes, the knowledge that she had already won. Earth's invocation of Article 72 is hereby recognized as valid, the High Arbiter announced. The Council acknowledges that we failed in our duty to protect a developing species from systematic exploitation. Earth is granted temporary enforcement authority to recover its citizens and prosecute those responsible for crimes against humanity. Temporary? Peters questioned, her tone sharp. For a period of 10 standard years, the High Arbiter clarified, after which the Council will review the situation and determine if continued independent enforcement is necessary. Peters was silent for a long moment, clearly communicating with her superiors through some private channel. Finally, she nodded. Earth accepts these terms with one addition. Any species or government that interferes with our enforcement operations will face immediate military response. No warnings, no negotiations, no diplomatic immunity. That is, the High Arbiter began, then stopped himself. Agreed. The Council will issue a formal resolution to all member governments. And just like that, it was over. The Council had bent, not broken, but certainly bowed, before a species they had considered beneath notice. Earth had forced its way to the table through a combination of military might and moral authority. And the galaxy would never be quite the same. Back on Haven Station, Vekris watched as human personnel began releasing ships that had been caught in the lockdown. The Silver Dawn received clearance to depart within the hour. His cargo was still intact, his ship undamaged, and he had committed no crimes that Earth cared about. He was free to go. But Marcus remained aboard, helping coordinate with the Earth military personnel who were setting up a permanent presence at the station. The human had healed almost completely now, his injuries reduced to fading scars and the occasional limp when he moved too quickly. "You're staying?" Vekris asked, finding Marcus in the cargo bay where they had first met. "For a while," Marcus confirmed. "Earth needs people who understand the merchant routes, who know how the independent stations work. I'm going to help identify slaver networks, track down the buyers, make sure nobody falls through the cracks. And after that," Marcus smiled, but there was no humor in it. "After that, I go home. See my family. If they still recognize me after everything that's happened, try to be normal again. Though I don't know if normal is possible after what I've seen." Vekris nodded, understanding more than he could put into words. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I just wanted to help." "I know," Marcus said. "And you did help. You saved my life when you could have looked away. That took courage. The galaxy needs more beings like you, Captain. People who make the hard choice even when it costs them something." "What did it cost me?" Vekris asked. "My company's backing away from me, sure, but I'm alive. My ship is intact. I haven't lost anything." Marcus looked at him with something like pity. "You lost your innocence. You used to believe the galaxy was basically good, that the system worked, that doing the right thing was enough. Now you know better. Now you know that sometimes good people have to do terrible things to stop evil from flourishing. That knowledge, that understanding, you can't unknow it. It changes you forever." Vekris thought about that as he walked back to the Silver Dawn, his crew silent around him. Marcus was right, of course. He had changed. The merchant captain who had docked at Haven Station a week ago no longer. 3 months after Haven Station, the galaxy had learned to fear the color blue. Earth warships painted their hulls in deep ocean blue with white star patterns, a visual calling card that preceded their arrival like a promise of reckoning. Vekris heard stories from other merchants, Tales whispered in station bars and trading posts across 6 sectors. A blue ship had appeared at the Corthan mining facility and extracted 17 humans from slave conditions. A blue ship had intercepted a Veltorian transport and discovered 8 humans hidden in cargo containers. A blue ship had surrounded a Draxan privateer base and demanded surrender, then demonstrated what happened when demands were ignored. The humans were systematic in their hunt, working through the list of 650 names with relentless efficiency. Some surrendered immediately when Earth warrants were issued. Others ran, which only delayed the inevitable. A few tried to fight, which ended exactly as badly as everyone expected. But it wasn't just the military operations that changed things. Earth had opened diplomatic relations with dozens of species, offering trade agreements, technology exchanges, and mutual defense pacts. They were building a network, creating alliances with younger species who had also felt the weight of galactic indifference. Within weeks, Earth's sphere of influence had expanded from a single backwater system to a coalition that controlled 12% of known space. The Zelthian consortium called Vekris back to the homeworld for a formal review. He knew what that meant, knew they wanted to distance themselves from his actions at Haven Station. But when he arrived at the corporate headquarters expecting censure, he found something unexpected. The boardroom was filled with senior captains and executives, their crystalline faces reflecting the harsh lighting and fractured patterns. The CEO, an ancient Zelthian named Orthus, sat at the head of the table with an expression Vekris couldn't quite read. "Captain Vekris," Orthus began, his voice carrying the weight of centuries, "your actions at Haven Station have created significant complications for our organization." "I understand," Vekris said, standing straight despite his fear. "I'm prepared to resign if that's what the consortium requires." Orthus held up a hand. "You misunderstand. I said complications, not disasters. In the 3 months since Haven Station, we have received over 200 contract offers from Earth corporations, all specifically requesting Zelthian vessels, specifically requesting ships captained by beings who showed moral courage when it mattered." Vekris blinked, all 4 eyes in confusion. "I don't understand." "Earth remembers its friends," Orthus explained. "You saved one of their people when you could have looked away. Now Earth wants to do business with us, with the Zelthian consortium, because we employ captains like you. Our stock value has increased 47%. Trade routes that were declining are now profitable again. You didn't damage our reputation, Captain. You enhanced it." Another executive, a younger Zelthian named Cressa, leaned forward. "More than that, other species are following Earth's example. The Thalians have announced a zero-tolerance policy for slavery in their space. The Mordian Alliance is conducting investigations into labor conditions. 12 independent stations have implemented new screening protocols for suspicious cargo. Change is happening, real change, because Earth proved that standing up to the old system is possible." Vekris sat down heavily, his mind struggling to process this information. He had expected punishment, maybe exile. Instead, he was being praised, held up as an example of something the consortium wanted to encourage. "What do you want from me?" he asked. Orthus smiled, a rare expression for his species. "Continue doing what you're doing. Run your routes, make your trades, but maintain the ethical standards you demonstrated at Haven Station. Earth has made it clear that they value integrity in their trading partners. We want to be the consortium that Earth trusts, and that means having captains they respect." The meeting continued for another hour, discussing new contracts and route changes and the shifting politics of a galaxy, learning to accommodate a rising power. When Vekris finally left the headquarters, he felt lighter than he had in months. His choice had cost him nothing. Instead, it had opened doors he never knew existed. But the galaxy wasn't peaceful. Even as trade flourished and diplomatic relations expanded, the hunt for slavers continued with brutal efficiency. Earth published regular updates on their enforcement operations. Each report a list of names, locations, and outcomes. Some surrendered, some died resisting arrest. A few were never found, presumed to have fled beyond explored space rather than face human justice. The trial of the crushing Talon crew took place on Earth, broadcast across the galaxy as a message to anyone who might consider following in their footsteps. Vekris watched from the Silver Dawn's observation deck as human prosecutors presented evidence, survivor testimonies, and the cold mathematics of suffering measured in lives destroyed. Marcus testified, standing before the court in formal attire, his voice steady as he described his capture. his torture and his near death in a shipping container. Other survivors testified too, their stories variations on a theme of cruelty and degradation. The Draxan defendants sat in restraints, their expressions ranging from defiance to resignation. The verdict was unanimous. The sentences were execution for the ship's captain and senior officers, life imprisonment for the rest. The Draxan government protested, calling it murder disguised as justice, but their protests fell on deaf ears. Earth had promised consequences, and Earth delivered. In the aftermath of the trial, something shifted in galactic consciousness. The old assumptions, the comfortable cruelties, the willful blindness to suffering, all of it was harder to maintain now. Earth had held up a mirror to the galaxy's worst impulses and refused to look away. Some species were changing their laws, implementing reforms, trying to be better. Others doubled down, retreating into isolationism or open hostility toward human interference. The Draxan Confederacy formally declared Earth an enemy state, though they carefully avoided any military action that might provoke direct conflict. The Kryn Consortium reviewed its labor practices under intense pressure from Earth-aligned species. The Veltorians issued an apology for their role in the slave trade and paid reparations to recovered human victims. And through it all, blue ships patrolled the space lanes, hunting the remnants of the slave networks with mechanical precision. Vikrus found himself working Earth contracts regularly now, transporting goods between Earth colonies and allied stations. The work was profitable and, more importantly, clean. No more unmarked cargo, no more questions not asked. Every shipment was documented, every transaction transparent. He met other humans during these runs, engineers and diplomats and traders who were building Earth's presence across the galaxy. They were remarkably diverse, these humans, varying in appearance and culture and temperament in ways that surprised him, but they all shared something fundamental. A fierce protectiveness of their own kind that bordered on obsessive. "We remember what it's like to be vulnerable," one human trader explained to Vikrus over drinks at a station bar. Her name was Sarah, and she ran supply chains between Earth and the outer colonies. "For thousands of years we were prey animals trying to survive on a world that wanted us dead. We learned to protect each other, because that was the only way to survive. That instinct doesn't go away just because we're in space now. But you've become predators yourselves," Vikrus observed. "The way Earth hunts slavers, the efficiency of your military operations, it's terrifying." Sarah nodded, swirling her drink thoughtfully. "That's the thing about humans. We can be both. We're protective and loving and fiercely loyal to our pack, but threaten someone in our pack and we become something else entirely. Every predator in human evolution that tried to hunt us, we hunted them back harder. We outlasted them, outthought them, and eventually drove most of them extinct. That same instinct applies now, just on a bigger scale." "Does it ever bother you?" Vikrus asked. "The violence, the death, the fact that Earth has killed hundreds of beings in the past 3 months?" Sarah's expression hardened. Every single one of those beings chose to participate in slavery. They chose to hurt humans for profit. They made their choice knowing it was wrong, counting on the fact that nobody would care enough to stop them. Earth proved them wrong. I won't lose sleep over people who made their living from suffering." Vikrus understood her logic but couldn't quite embrace it. His species had never been warriors, never faced the existential threats that shaped human psychology. The Zelthians had always been traders, negotiators, beings who found safety in commerce and diplomacy. The human capacity for controlled violence, for righteous fury, was fundamentally alien to him. But he respected it. Feared it certainly, but respected it too. On his next run to an Earth colony, Vikrus asked to meet with Marcus. The human had returned home after his months helping coordinate the anti-slavery operations, and Vikrus wanted to see how he was doing. They met in a small restaurant on the colony's main habitat ring, surrounded by humans going about their daily lives. Marcus looked healthier than Vikrus had ever seen him. The injuries had healed completely, leaving only faint scars that he didn't bother to hide. He smiled when he saw Vikrus, a genuine expression that 5 years after Haven Station, the Galactic Council held a commemoration ceremony that nobody had expected. Vikrus stood in the Grand Council chamber, uncomfortable in formal attire, surrounded by dignitaries from across known space. The chamber had changed since he last saw it on broadcast during Earth's confrontation with the Council. New seats had been added, representing species that had joined or been granted voice in the years since. One of those seats belonged to Earth, now a full voting member with influence that extended far beyond their relatively small territory. Ambassador Peters, older now but still carrying that dangerous confidence, approached Vekris with a smile. "Captain Vekris, thank you for coming. I know this kind of ceremony isn't your style." "I'm a merchant, not a diplomat," Vekris agreed. "But when Earth and the Council both ask me to attend, I can't exactly refuse." "You could," Peters said, "but you're here anyway. That says something about your character." The ceremony began with the High Arbiter taking the center platform, his ancient form moving slowly, but with dignity. His voice, when he spoke, carried across the chamber with the weight of acknowledgement long delayed. 5 years ago, this council failed in its most fundamental duty. We failed to protect those who relied on our laws for safety. We allowed suffering to continue because intervention was inconvenient, because challenging the status quo was uncomfortable, because we chose order over justice. The chamber was silent. Representatives from dozens of species listened with expressions ranging from shame to defiance to thoughtful consideration. One being changed that, the High Arbiter continued. A Zelthian merchant captain named Vekris, commanding the vessel Silver Dawn, discovered a human being held in conditions of slavery. He could have looked away. His culture, his company, even basic self-preservation suggested that looking away was the wise choice. Instead, Captain Vekris chose to help, knowing it could cost him everything. Vekris felt every eye in the chamber turn toward him. He wanted to shrink into his seat, but Peters had positioned him in a place where shrinking was impossible. That choice, the High Arbiter said, became the catalyst for change that reshaped our entire civilization. Earth's response, while aggressive, was ultimately justified under laws we had failed to enforce. The subsequent reforms, the new protections for vulnerable species, the enhanced enforcement mechanisms, all of this grew from one merchant captain's moment of courage. The High Arbiter gestured, and a holographic display filled the chamber. Statistics and data streams showing the past 5 years in objective detail. Slavery prosecutions had increased by 3,000%. 16 new species had achieved protected status under enhanced council oversight. Trade in sapient beings had dropped to near zero in council space, driven underground or eliminated entirely. The cost was significant, the High Arbiter acknowledged. Over 2,000 beings died in enforcement operations, most of them criminals resisting arrest, but some innocent casualties caught in conflicts they didn't start. Entire economic sectors collapsed when their foundations and exploitation were exposed. Some governments fell, others reformed under pressure, and the political landscape of our galaxy was fundamentally altered. He paused, letting the weight of those numbers settle. But against that cost we must weigh the gains. 47,000 sapient beings freed from bondage, an entire industry of suffering dismantled, and most importantly, a message sent across the galaxy that some lines cannot be crossed, that some actions will always have consequences. No matter how powerful the perpetrator or how weak the victim, the High Arbiter turned to face Vekris directly. "Captain Vekris, the Galactic Council wishes to formally recognize your actions at Haven Station. You are hereby awarded the Star of Conscience, the Council's highest civilian honor, for demonstrating moral courage in circumstances where such courage changed the course of history." 2 council aides approached, carrying a crystalline medal that refracted light into rainbow patterns. They placed it around Vekris's neck with ceremonial precision. The medal was heavy, both physically and symbolically, representing a weight Vekris would carry forever. "I don't deserve this," Vekris said, his voice barely carrying beyond the first few rows. "I just did what felt right." "That's exactly why you deserve it," Peters said from beside him. "Anyone can do the right thing when it's easy. You did it when it was hard." The ceremony continued with speeches from various representatives, some praising the changes of the past 5 years, others expressing concern about Earth's continued military operations in frontier space. The humans had kept their promise, hunting slavers relentlessly, but they had also expanded their territory and influence in ways that made traditional powers nervous. After the official proceedings ended, Vekris found himself at a reception surrounded by beings who wanted to meet the merchant captain, who started it all. He shook hands, and claws and tentacles made small talk in a dozen languages, and tried not to think about how surreal his life had become. Marcus found him on a balcony overlooking the council complex, escaping the crowd for a moment of peace. The human looked distinguished now, wearing the uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps with comfortable authority. The scars from his ordeal had faded to nearly invisible lines, but something in his eyes suggested the internal scars remained. "Quite a day," Marcus said, joining Vecris at the railing. "I still don't understand why they're honoring me," Vecris admitted. "You're the one who survived. Earth is the one who forced change. I just opened a cargo container." "And that's the point," Marcus replied. "Anyone could have opened that container. Most wouldn't have. You did, and everything else followed from that choice. You showed that change was possible, that individuals still mattered in a galaxy of bureaucracies and power structures. That's worth celebrating." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching ships come and go from the council complex. The traffic was heavier than it had been 5 years ago, representing increased commerce and communication between species who had rarely interacted before. Earth's influence had opened new channels, created new partnerships, forced old rivals to work together in response to the new power dynamic. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked quietly. "If you could go back to that moment, knowing everything that would follow, would you still open the container?" Vecris considered the question seriously. He thought about the war, the deaths, the upheaval. He thought about the fear he had felt watching Earth warships blockade Haven Station. He thought about the nights he couldn't sleep, wondering if his choice had made the galaxy better or just different. But he also thought about the 47,000 beings freed from slavery. He thought about the species who no longer lived in fear of exploitation. He thought about Marcus, alive and healthy, building a life instead of dying in a mining colony. He thought about the children who would grow up in a galaxy where their lives had value, where laws meant something, where the powerful couldn't prey on the weak with impunity. "Yes," Vecris said finally, "I would still open the container." The galaxy needed to change. Maybe it needed someone like you and Earth to force that change, but it also needed someone to take that first step, to show that the old ways weren't inevitable. "I'm glad I was the one who took it." Marcus smiled, genuine and warm. "Earth hasn't forgotten that, you know. We talk about you in our diplomatic training. Use your story as an example of how one person's choice can matter. You've become part of human cultural memory, the alien who chose compassion when it would have been easier to look away." "That's a heavy burden," Vecris observed. "Most important things are," Marcus agreed. A priority message came through on Vecris's communicator. He checked it and felt surprise ripple through him. The message was from Earth government, formal and official. An offer for a permanent position as liaison between Earth trading interests and independent merchant fleets. The position came with significant authority, diplomatic status, and the kind of resources Vecris had never imagined having access to. "They want me to work for Earth officially," Vecris said, showing Marcus the message. Marcus read it and nodded. "Makes sense. You understand both sides, the independent merchants and Earth's objectives. You've proven yourself trustworthy in situations where trust was hard. And honestly, having someone like you in that role would make a lot of merchants more comfortable dealing with Earth." "Is that what I've become?" Vecris asked. "Earth's merchant?" "You've become someone who bridges worlds," Marcus corrected. "Someone who understands that doing the right thing sometimes means making uncomfortable choices. Earth needs people like that, especially as we continue growing our presence in the galaxy. We don't want to be conquerors or tyrants. We want to be partners, but partners who won't compromise on core values. You can help us walk that line." Vecris looked at the message again, at the future it represented. A future where he wasn't just a simple merchant captain running routes for profit. A future where he had real influence, real ability to shape how Earth and the rest of the galaxy interacted. It was frightening and exciting in equal measure. "I'll think about it," Vecris said finally. "That's all anyone can ask," Marcus replied. The reception wound down as the sun set over the council complex, artificial lighting gradually replacing natural illumination. Vecris found